Hello, and welcome to episode 3 of the Audiotocracy podcast. I'm Shannon Perry, founder of Audiotocracy Podcast Production, and today I'm welcoming to the mic the amazing Moji Igun, founder of Blue Daisy Consulting. Blue Daisy offers zero waste and sustainability consulting services to small businesses. She supports her clients in reducing waste by helping them find creative ways to keep trash out of the landfill. Moji is certified as a true zero-waste advisor and enjoys drawing connections between zero waste and the broader spectrum of sustainability. She also serves on the board of directors for Zero Waste Washington. No matter what size your business is or what role you play in it, I think you'll find some very valuable information on this podcast. Then, please, check out Moji's services at bluedaisy.com. That's Daisy with an I. Well, thank you very much for joining me, Moji. Could you tell me a little bit about Blue Daisy? I'm a huge fan of anyone who's working in sustainability, and so I'm very curious how you got to be doing this, the business that you're doing.
Yeah, so that's a great question. That's like the most frequently asked question. So what Blue Daisy Consulting is I offer zero waste and sustainability consulting services to small businesses, and I do that in a way that helps it not be so overwhelming. And so I actually am an engineer by trade. I studied mechanical engineering in college. I was trying to work in the automotive industry. That's kind of what my career path was projected to be. And I just had this realization later in my college years that I just didn't want to do that. I didn't want to stick with that industry. It was interesting. I thought that I would be good at it, but it just wasn't calling me. So I kind of did a bunch of little detours. I worked in education, construction, and it was while I was working in my construction job as a quality engineer that I kind of learned about the zero waste movement and started noticing trash around me everywhere. And so I really just noticed a problem, got really obsessed with it almost, and created a job that would solve it. So I don't have any formal training in sustainability, but I'm using my engineering, problem solving, and systems thinking to do this work.
So I love that you're doing this. Why did you decide to start your own business? Was there just nobody out there doing it to hire you, or you thought I'll just take it on my own?
Yes and no. So there are definitely plenty of people doing zero waste work in many different facets. There's also something called the circular economy, which I'm happy to dive into later. But there's lots of work going on in those areas. But I didn't see it being done in the way that I wanted to do it, or that I thought would be a beneficial addition. So I wasn't finding jobs that were exactly what I wanted to work on. So I decided to create one for myself.
That's brilliant. I love that. So what was the missing piece?
I think it's a more intersectional lens about sustainability. So, oftentimes, a lot of the places that I was looking at talk about sustainability, or at least zero waste specifically, in terms of metrics, wanting to kind of work towards zero waste. And it's very scientific, which I
Mhm.
appreciate as a science minded person. But
Mhm.
there was no real conversation in those same rooms about culture, race, colonialism, a lot of systems of oppression that are completely relevant to this work. So it was kind of having one without the other, which is possible to get the work done, but not in a way that I wanted it to get done. So I decided to create it for myself.
I love that. Can you tell us a little bit about how does that work? What is different about the way you approach sustainability?
I really think it's just the mindset. So we're doing the same things. The goal is zero waste. And
Right.
so what that means is that a certified zero waste business, or a legitimate zero waste business, diverts at least 90% of their trash away from the landfill. So instead of sending all of your junk to the landfill, you'll find ways to recycle or compost or prevent that waste from existing in the first place, or other creative solutions. And there's doing that, but there's doing that in a way that is not just recycling better or composting better, but thinking about food justice and how we can get people the food that they need. So it's not just composting, but can we give food to people who actually need it? It's not
Mhm.
just thinking about things on one level, the environmental level, but all of the different facets.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's such an interesting and so important way to look at it, because I'm sure most of us think of, well, we put in our kitchens the recycle bin, the compost bin and the trash bin, and as long as those first two are fuller than the third one, we're good, right? But we don't
Sure.
really think about it on a cultural and intersectional level like that. I think that's really, really important. Um,
Thanks.
could you give a little bit more detail about the process then that you would go through when you start with a new business?
Yeah, so there are a lot of different ways to work with me, and I try my best to customize it to the individual client that comes to me. But some of the overarching buckets I have, one is just one-on-one coaching. So, say you come to me, you sell a product, and you're curious about zero waste, and you have no idea what that actually means. Call me up, outsource that research and that energy that you would put into figuring out yourself, and just have me help you guide you through the process. So that could look like figuring out what are the biggest pieces of your product or whatever you make that's generating waste, and how can we make some switches or figure out ways to make it easier for people to be more sustainable. So that's one bucket of things you can do, just like
Mhm.
hour one-off sessions.
Fantastic.
You can get more in depth by doing actual zero waste audits, which is actually my favorite part about it, about my work, is actually digging through people's trash or their business's trash, not your personal trash, but
Right.
digging through the trash, analyzing it, weighing it, and seeing what's in there so that we really specifically know what waste are you generating and what are your biggest opportunities. So we can do all of that, and then even beyond that, if you're just kind of dabbling in zero waste, I do workshops and educational events that help people understand what I'm talking about when I say zero waste and what that looks like from an interconnected intersectional lens. So plenty of ways to work with me.
That's so fascinating. Just so interesting. So what do you find in people's trash and to talk about?
I mean, lots of things, so many things. Nothing too crazy, but you can learn a lot about people by what they throw away. And
Mhm.
honestly, it's interesting that to kind of go off on the topic of how zero waste is so interconnected with other things. I find that the trash piece is really the symptom that we're solving, that
Mm.
where the recycling and composting, that's great. I want people to do that. But there's a deeper issue in there of why do we think this stuff is waste in the first place?
Mhm.
Is our culture so focused on consumption and overconsumption to the point where we're destroying ecosystems? Why do we send our trash to places where it's closer to Black and Brown communities? So those are the deeper things that I kind of want to push us towards. But first, we have
Mhm.
to notice the problem in the first place.
Right, right. Yeah. I think too many of us feel like if we're putting it in the trash can, that's us being a good citizen, as opposed to just throwing it on the ground, right? But
Sure,
there's so
sure,
much more
sure.
to it than that. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and it's just unraveling those layers over time.
Right. Out of curiosity, if someone is not at a decision making point in the company, they're not in a leadership role, but are somewhere further down the food chain there, but is really committed to sustainability. How do you get what tools can you put in that person's hands to get their business to shift direction when it comes to things like sustainability?
That's a really great question. That's also a frequently asked question. Yeah, there are so many different avenues, and I'm not gonna like beat around the bush and say it's easy. It's not easy. It's
Hmm.
very challenging. But I think that a key tool that I can give people is to find what matters to your decision makers. So, for example, if they are just about the dollar, they want to know how are they going to save money, what's the ROI, see what you can do to figure that out for them. So you do all the research, figure out what is that ROI, what does that look like, what does that investment mean, and kind of present them with that data. So you could try that route. Or another route is find out what else matters to them. If you have other initiatives in your company, maybe you have a focus on health and wellness or employee engagement or diversity inclusion, how can you tack on these kind of sustainability initiatives to those? Because they
Mm-hmm.
really are so interconnected. It's just finding out how to make those connections for people.
Oh, that's great. That's truly fascinating.
Thanks.
What are the biggest barriers small businesses face in trying to reach the zero waste?
Yeah, I would say I think number one is cost. I think
Hmm.
that scares off a lot of people because especially for small businesses, which is who I primarily work with. It's just we need to figure out how we're going to make payroll. We have to figure out what's the cheapest and most convenient way to make this happen to keep the business financially sustainable. And
Hmm.
so I'm completely sympathetic with that. And I don't want that to ever be a trade off that's debilitating for people. So it's just figuring out what are those trade offs that you're willing to make and how can you make that work for you. So I think cost is a really big one. And on the other hand, I think that the kind of stigma about having to do it right the first time scares people off as well because they don't want to
Right.
say that they're sustainable and then make a mistake and then people kind of get mad at them and it all seems very scary. And so I try to encourage people, at least my clients, to think about progress over perfection, that show people that you're
Nice.
trying, that you're doing something, that you're at least thinking about it, and people will respond positively if they see that you're making an effort as opposed to not doing anything at all out of fear. So, yeah, I think those are the two biggest ones I notice.
That's amazing. Um, yeah, I noticed that and I hope this is changing as more people are moving towards sustainability. But yeah, the sustainable products are often the more expensive ones,
Hmm.
right? Like I recently bought new business cards and I went for the recycled paper that, biodegradable, blah, blah, blah.
Sure.
And it's, $10 a box more expensive. Are you
Hmm.
seeing a shift in practices towards more sustainability? Are we shifting? Are we in the right direction or are we going the wrong way? Like what are you seeing?
I think that's a really good question. And I think that has a lot of layers to it. I am an optimist and I think that we're going in a good direction. I see a lot of sustainable components being implemented in more mainstream products. So, like, for example, I was on Twitter the other day and I saw, I think it was Windex, something that has a spray bottle. And they had this whole campaign about how they want people to reuse the nozzle and they're going to sell things without a nozzle because they want to reduce plastic waste. And so,
Nice.
whether or not you're a fan of Windex or whatever, that's at least they're trying something that they can see that consumers are asking for. And so, I have faith that that's going to continue to push momentum forward.
I love that. Yeah, I was seeing something on this morning about Starbucks using borrowed cups. I want to look more into that,
Yes.
but what do you know more about that?
Yes, I believe that's a collaboration with Ridwell, which is a local company here in Seattle. And what Ridwell does is they make it easy for you to get rid of things well, which is where their name comes from.
Right.
So you can recycle like plastic film, which is really hard to recycle, or
Mm-hmm.
textiles, or batteries, things that are kind of tough to find simple ways to recycle. And so their initiative with Starbucks is to have like a take back program with the cups. So you have like your reusable cup, you drink out your coffee and then you return it to a bin where they sterilize it and put it back into circulation. So
Oh,
we're trying to
fabulous.
eliminate those single use coffee cups over time.
Oh, that's great. Because, I
Yeah.
think it sounds like such a small thing, but if you look at it across the scale of Starbucks, like that's a
Yes.
lot of coffee cups.
Yes,
That's
and
an
that's the
enormous
thing.
amount.
And the thing too is having kind of attacking this issue from all sides. So a small business might not be able to figure out the infrastructure for this kind of program, but
Right.
getting someone like Starbucks to lead the way really pushes this forward, and then we can kind of follow in their footsteps. And then on the other side, consumers and small businesses do what they can with the resources that they have, but maybe don't get too stressed about getting that perfection that corporations can achieve.
That's great. So it's sort of a double question. What are some of your favorite solutions that you've brought to small businesses for sustainability? And also, what are some of the traps that businesses get sold, but that isn't possible, perhaps as useful as we'd like to think they are?
Yeah, so I'll start with your second question first about the traps.
Okay.
So there's this term called greenwashing, which is when brands give misleading claims about the environmental benefits of their product or their service. So they say their product is clean, green, natural, eco. There's a leaf on it, there's a little tree on it, and you're just like, yes, this must be a good
Right.
thing. And the thing is that it's just really great marketing. It works to kind of get a quick point across, but some of the traps people fall into is not interrogating that further. And so there are some brands out there that use those same words, clean, green, eco, who are truly doing that stuff. And we have to remember that those words don't really mean anything. They're kind of marketing buzzwords, but they are really doing things that matter in the sustainability space, but it's just asking those questions and diving deeper into what do they mean by this thing is natural? Because like arsenic, for example, is
Right.
natural and you don't want
Right.
to consume that. So thinking about those things a little bit deeper is a really good thing to avoid greenwashing. And then your first question was about what are some of my favorite solutions. They really vary across every single business. That's like the most fun part about the work that I do is that it's creating a custom solution for your specific business. So I want to give one challenge that I had, which was a client. They were based out of Texas, kind of rural Texas. So what had
Mm-hmm.
happened was their recycling program decided to no longer serve their city. So
Ooh.
so they wanted to recycle their cardboard and paper, but they just didn't have anyone to pick it up. And so one of our creative solutions was to reach out to a local grocery store. I think it was an HEB. I don't live in Texas, so I'm not sure, but I think it's an HEB. And they asked if they could give them their cardboard boxes and send them off with their company, like their corporate system. And so we partnered up with the grocery store, figured out what the
Brilliant.
logistics were, and they could take it off. So it's just kind of asking around in your community, figuring out what resources are available, and then creating those creative solutions.
Oh, that's really great. That's so brilliant. And I love that HEB was willing to do that
Yeah, I mean, because
with
they're
them.
already doing it. It's just a handful more boxes. What is that going to hurt
Right.
anyone? So.
Right. Oh, that's perfect. That's so great. Is apathy the biggest problem?
Mm.
And uh how do you overcome that?
I actually don't think it's apathy. I think that the at least what I'm noticing, the biggest problem is that people feel so overwhelmed
Mm-hmm.
by addressing capital C climate change. Like it just
Mm-hmm.
seems so scary. And what can I do? And it's just too much. And like it kind of gets to be a little doom and gloom, I think, in people's heads.
Mm-hmm.
Or even if I were to do this, like I can't really afford to make these switches forever. So I think people get overwhelmed by how large the problem is. But
Mm-hmm.
what I try to do is just make things very practical and small and simple so that it's just switch from this vendor to this vendor. You've made some progress. Now do this to this. You made progress. Like seeing those little baby steps instead of seeing the entire mountain at the beginning and not starting in
Right.
the first place.
Right. Oh yeah, that's so true. Those manageable steps are so much just look down, not up at the
Yeah,
mountain.
yeah.
Yeah.
Stay down.
Focus on what you can work with.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. So can you take me back a little bit again to the intersectionality and the cultural aspects? I'm very curious what that how do you express that and define that to your clients, and then how do you solve that?
Yeah, so I'll give an example from a session I had a few weeks ago. But this was a friend who she makes soaps and other kind of body goods, and she already does a lot of amazing things. She is very particular about her ingredient sourcing and has sustainable packaging. And so I was like, what do you need me for? You're already doing all the great stuff. But we talked about is that she has some odds and ends from her soap, and she's like, well, sometimes I sell them as little extras or gift packages. And I asked her, well, do you have any women's shelters in your neighborhood? Would you think
Mm,
about donating them to a women's shelter? And she was like, oh, that's a great idea. I had never thought about that. And so that's a very basic solution, but
mhm,
thinking about what do I have and what do other people need and how can we partner those things together. I think that almost oversimplifies, but really simplifies like what social and environmental justice are about is that imbalance of power
mhm.
and resources and figuring out ways to level out that power imbalance.
That's great. Oh, so important. And like you said, we often just don't think of those things. So when someone's there to kind of nudge it into our vision, it makes a big difference.
Hmm.
Okay, so if you could have the ear of anyone, if you could spend a few hours trying to convince a particular person or persons to go greener, who would you want to talk to?
Oh, okay. Well, so I said I'm an idealist a minute ago, but now I'm turning into a realist because I'm like,
Okay,
who could I
fair.
actually get in the door? If I'm being really honest, like if I could snap my fingers and fix things tomorrow, it would be straight towards whoever is in charge of fossil fuel lobbies at the U.S. government and get
Hmm.
them to stop. That would be meeting number one, and then from there. Yeah, I think just any business owner, large scale business owner who wants to listen and is interested in this but doesn't isn't sure if consumers are ready for it, I would
Hmm.
tell them that they are ready for it, that they're asking for it, and we just need to move in that direction.
That's great. Yep. And yeah, and I remember a few years ago, Microsoft went to compostable silverware, plasticware,
Yeah,
which was, and when a big company like that does it, it actually moves the needle for everybody, right? So that suddenly that becomes
absolutely.
more affordable. Yeah. So
Yeah, and they have the resources to do more, so they can keep going.
exactly, exactly. What's one action that we could all take today to do better?
I think that depends on you as an individual. I don't like to give like blanket solutions or like quick tips because
Right.
it's just so customized to who you are as a person. I
Hmm.
wouldn't say everyone go get solar panels because that's just not
Right.
realistic, but I
Right.
would love if that was a reality. So I think the first step is just noticing, paying attention, seeing what's in your neighborhood, what problems there are, where does your individual waste come from, and just start to notice those patterns and then make one change. So maybe after the pandemic, when we're all kind of back to doing things the way we used to, can you switch from a disposable coffee cup to a reusable coffee cup? Very simple. It doesn't feel like you're doing much, but it's that paradigm shift that you start
Mhm.
thinking about these things. And then if you're anything like me, that will just kind of make you fall down a rabbit hole and you just will keep noticing these things. So
Yeah,
that's my hope.
that's great. Yes, and it's amazing how many low hanging fruit there are for all of us, I think.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
yeah, things that we can all do a little bit better. What are the biggest obstacles you face as a business owner?
Ooh, that's a big question too.
And that could be in your niche or just generally.
Yeah, I think it's as a small business owner, as someone with a really it's mostly me and I have a very small team supporting me, but there's so much emotion and love put into the work that I do. I feel so strongly that
Nice.
the world would be better that if we were working towards zero waste, that this is not only an environmental thing, but it's a social and economic opportunity that we need to be pursuing. And so this is what I eat, sleep, and breathe. And so when people either don't respond to it or they're just not about it, it does, like, affect me personally because I just feel
Hmm.
so deeply about it. So I think
Hmm.
that, yeah, just working through those kind of mental blocks when it's either imposter syndrome or just feeling kind of overwhelmed or hopeless, like, working through that is the hardest piece.
Gotcha. Yeah. Has the pandemic changed how you've done your business, or has it changed the nature of your business?
Yeah, it's well, I mean, most things are virtual now. So that
Hmm.
I was mentioning earlier how you can work with me through coaching and just like book a hour with me. That is new from the pandemic because I'm not able to kind of be out and about as much as I'd like to. So
Right.
that's definitely new. And I think that people's businesses have shifted as well. So we're kind of balancing all these different shifts and changes that have happened over the past year. And so helping people understand that not only is this good for the planet if we want to do this change, but we have to think about the health and safety aspect of it with the
Hmm.
coronavirus. So there's a lot of things that I've had to learn in the past year to make sure that I'm still able to serve my clients.
Great. That's great. Yeah. Yeah. I feel like maybe we're doing less damage during the pandemic, but I don't know if that's
Ye-
sustainable and
Yes and no, yes and no.
yeah.
We've reduced a little bit of carbon emissions, but our waste is way up because of
Uh
safe like gloves and masks and disposable things.
right.
So it
Right.
I think it balances out in the end, but I think it's more of the mindset shift that we need to focus on. So
Right. Yeah, agreed. And I see masks littering the sidewalks.
right.
It's the new trash that you see in the
Yes.
street, which is so
Yeah,
unfortunate, especially
it
since it
is.
has strings that, you know, do things to wildlife we'd rather not think
Yeah,
about. But yeah,
absolutely.
for sure. So, what resources would you recommend in addition to consulting with you that
Mhm.
for a business or even an individual or an organization that wants to be more sustainable?
Yeah, I'm not sure I have a great resource off the top of my head. I think that what's really helpful if you are interested in sustainability in your business is finding a part of sustainability that resonates with you. So if you listen to this whole podcast and you're like, I don't want to talk about trash, I could care less, or I couldn't care less, like you don't need to stress about not doing that. Maybe you care about food waste and healthy food systems, like go that direction, or
Mhm.
whatever it may be. I just really encourage people to kind of go deep into that thing instead of being too overwhelmed by the breadth of it. Just focus in on what you care about, and then notice how it interconnects with everything else. So yeah, any book on that topic that you love, any documentary, podcast, like dive deep into that subject matter.
That's great. What kind of milestones do you set for businesses? And I'm assuming this is probably tailored very much to each individual situation, of course, but
Right.
excuse me, like what would be a success marker for a company?
Yeah, so I'll go back to that client in Texas where, so the I mentioned earlier how zero waste. If you wanted to get certified, the cutoff is 90% diversion. And
Wow.
so with this business, we got a plan. The action plan that we created at the end of our project ended up with 80%, which is actually pretty amazing considering they don't have recycling in their city. And so we had to find creative ways to finagle that number, but figuring out what your diversion rate is one way, figuring out cost savings is another way, and then just figuring out what easy shifts can you make. So like you said earlier, low hanging fruit, just jumping on that, maybe not even worrying about the metrics of it all, but just if we just switch from this to that, we can do that in 1 second. Let's just do that. So I try not to get people too bogged down in the the data of it all. The data helps guide the journey, but it shouldn't kind of hinder it. So
Mm-hmm.
using the data as a guidepost as opposed to kind of a rigid step that we need to do.
Right, right. That makes a lot of sense. You talked at the very beginning a little bit about cyclical recycling or
Circular economy.
circular economy. Could you talk a little bit about what that is and how that shows up?
Yeah, so zero waste is kind of like I see it as the introduction to the circular economy. So if you're thinking about zero waste, whether it's personally or in your workplace, you're thinking about, okay, how am I recycling better? How am I composting? That's the stepping stone into the circular economy, which is an economic system that's keeps materials in cycle as long as possible. So that could be through, for example, like a tool library is a piece of the
Mm.
circular economy. So we have one tool for the neighborhood, and we're all kind of borrowing and sharing it and passing along. That's an example of the circular economy. Another one is there's a company that's I believe they're based here in Seattle, but it's called Girlfriend Collective, and they sell athletic wear, so like leggings and cute workout gear. But they have this program called Re-Girlfriend where you can send your leggings at the end of their life back to the manufacturer. They will kind of shred them up and separate all the pieces and then use it to create new threads. So they've kind of
Awesome.
created this closed loop system where none of that material is going to waste. They've created a system where it all kind of just stays in circulation. So the circular economy is that on a larger scale, is that everything in, theoretically in our world can be kept in circulation so that we're no longer extracting materials from the ground, but just using what we already have.
Right, right. And there's got to be more than enough.
Oh, we have plenty of things to make this happen. It's just creating the systems to make that efficient and cost effective for the companies that do all of that logistics and
Right,
whatnot.
right, right. So when you're talking with a business, I'm assuming talk to leadership, but you also probably have to do some training at some lower levels as well. Lower,
Yeah,
that's a terrible way to put it, but at different levels as well.
sure.
How do you talk with employees at a company about sustainability? And it's more than just, use a mug from the kitchen rather than a disposable cup, I'm sure. But what else how else do you bring them into the conversation?
Yeah, so that's a perfect question. So lots of ways, and I think the number one way is through workshops. And I think just having a conversation like we're having right now about zero waste and showing people what it does look like and what it doesn't look like. So I have kind of like kind of canned intro to zero waste workshop that I do a lot that walks people through what we've talked about already today. And then I recently created a new free class called Zero Waste Mindset. And I'm happy to share it in the show notes, but it's
Great.
bluedaisy.com/free dash class, where I talk about zero waste more in depth about how it's an intersectional issue, how
Hmm.
it's a yes and solution to the climate crisis, how it can really help drive innovation. And so it's really having these conversations, opening people's eyes, and then giving them practical next steps. So whether that's
Hmm.
go do a trash audit now, like go dig through your trash, or ask your partner to change this about the grocery routine or whatever it may be, but just
Hmm.
giving people that nudge to try something and then let them kind of take it from there. So, yeah, lots of education and having these conversations.
Right. I think that's so important because there are people I know at a place I used to work where we weren't even entirely sure this paper towel, is this recyclable? Is it compostable? Like,
Yes.
there's always those questions, and it's sometimes difficult to figure out where to go with those questions and get them answered. So you just end up throwing it in the trash because that's at least that'll work, right? So
Yeah, and one of my favorite pieces of advice for people who come to me who are from either like entry level or management level who are not the decision makers in their company is to try your best to make zero waste or whatever new initiative both come from the bottom up and the top down.
hmm.
So get your decision maker on board and make them give you funding or whatever else you need, but also kind of talk to your colleagues, make it a groundswell. And if it's coming from both directions, that's when it's most sustainable in terms of getting that thing to stick. So if it's
Right.
just one way or the other, it kind of can lose steam. But if we get both, that's when like the real magic can happen.
Right. And this has got to lead to healthier workplaces, I would think.
Oh,
You know.
absolutely. I have a colleague who's like a sustainable building expert, and she talks about how like daylighting and better air quality and all of that stuff is just
Mhm.
interconnected. So once you kind of get rolling, you really see all of these really amazing benefits.
Yeah. Yeah. Even things like the cleansers that get used and you know,
Yes.
if the paper towels are bright white and plush, then I know that I'm not, maybe
They're
these aren't my
bleached
people.
or yeah,
Yeah.
exactly,
There's
exactly.
opportunity here for learning.
Yeah.
Yep. Excellent. So, could you recommend for us a book you love, a local business you love, a podcast you listen to, and a product that you really enjoy?
Yes, okay. So
And I can ask
book.
you those one at a time since that
Yeah,
was a
okay.
little, that was a little
Yeah.
fast.
Yeah, no worries. Okay, so let me start with a book that I love. I'm currently reading Untamed by Glennon Doyle, and I'm really, really enjoying it. It's making me, um, yeah, lots of reflection about themes in your life, and I love it a lot. So that's really good
Fantastic.
for some introspection. You said business next, a local
Hmm.
business. Oh, there are so many. I think my number one, specifically on the topic of zero waste, would be a shop called Eco Collective. If you Google them, they're based here in Seattle, and they are basically a zero waste shop that focuses on self care. So all the stuff that you need for like um, just feeling good, journals, home goods, they have it all, and they're literally my favorite store out there. Podcast. I really love Professional Troublemaker by Lovey Ajayi. She's really great for
Yes.
entrepreneurs who want to
Hmm.
get over that fear of whatever you're scared of. She's got a podcast episode for it. So I really love her. And I just bought her book recently. So that's
Nice.
another one too. And
Yeah,
then,
I love her on Twitter.
oh, she's so funny.
She's
Yeah,
great.
I want to be like her. Like
Right.
she's kind of someone I look up to, even though I will
Totally.
probably never meet her, but she's wonderful. Um, and products. I don't know if I have a specific product. I think it's a little counterintuitive for the zero waste person to want you to buy things. So I think
Right.
there's
Fair.
no product that I would recommend. But if you need to buy things, as we all do, it's just finding the best way to do that. So if you can buy it used, if you can borrow it instead of purchasing it, if you can
Mhm.
rent it, there's so many other ways to get things that aren't necessarily buying. So I think encouraging people to look into those resources is what I would say.
Fantastic. That is great. I absolutely love it. Is there anything that I haven't asked you that I should have?
I would just say, in addition to that free class that I have, I also have a free guide. So, I have a very clear roadmap to zero waste that I have in this little downloadable guide. So I'll send the link, but bluedaisy.com/free dash guide. and a quick roadmap. What is zero waste? Something you can share with people who maybe don't know what this world is. You can kind of send it to them and let them read it on
Love
their
it.
own and go from there. So, yeah, check out those two resources.
That's great. That's a very gentle nudge.
Yes, exactly.
I
Check
have a
this out.
I have something for you.
Maybe you want to read this.
That's right. I did have one more question that I realized I'd forgotten earlier. Blue Daisy, where does the name come from? Especially with the
Oh,
sort of interesting spelling.
yes, yes. So the Daisy is spelled with an I because it's a play off my middle name, which is Oludaisi. My family's from Nigeria, so that's how I remember how to spell it, was Daisy
Oh,
with an
nice.
I, because I wasn't raised in that culture, so I needed to know how to spell my own name. But it comes from thinking about sustainability both internally. So it's this is all my science nerd coming out in this
Go.
name. But, yeah.
Love it.
But so a daisy flower is actually two different kinds of flowers in one. So there's the middle, the yellow part, which are called disc florets, and then the white things that come out of the side are called ray florets. So it's like a two-in-one flower.
I did not
And
know
so,
this.
yeah, so that's my approach to sustainability, is that it's not just the internal piece of us doing our best as individuals, but how can we help that radiate outwards into our families, our society as a whole? And so it's that both approach that I wanted to make part of my company name.
Oh, I love that. That's perfect.
Thanks,
How
thank you.
beautiful is that? I love it. Okay, and can you tell us if someone wants to work with you, what is the best way to find you?
Yeah, so I'm really active on Instagram, on my personal Instagram. So that's at hippie Moji. And if you just want to learn more about my business, it's bluedaisy.com.
Daisy with an I,
Yes.
DAISI.com.
Yes.
Great. Okay. Well, thank you so much. This was really, really wonderful to hear all of this great information. And I hope everybody will take you up and that you will be flooded with business offers because we really need people doing this work.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Shannon.
Thank you so much. A huge thank you to Moji Igun for joining me for this conversation and for doing the work Blue Daisy does. You can find all the resources she talked about in the show notes, including her website, so you can schedule a consultation. If you're considering a podcast for your business, we'd love to help you. Audiotocracy has lots of podcast packages. We can find one to meet your needs and budget. Schedule a 45-minute free consultation at audiotocracy.com. Our music is by Darren Hart Robinson, and I'll see you next time.